questions are welcome, questions are good, so stop me, interrupt me at any point. We're going to start off with an onion. No, this is not a cooking program. An onion is it's a true bulb, but it's the example of a plant. I'm looking for my pocket knife. Here it is. I presume all of you have at some times cooked in the kitchen. That little part that you cut out and discard is the true stem of an onion. It's a very, very compressed stem, but that's the true stem of an onion. And I point that out because everyone's had the experience of cutting this out and discarding, and maybe not realizing that's the true stem of a bulb and a lot of herbaceous perennials. And so something like, I meant to grab an agave. Would you grab an agave from Vince's table? A hosta has the same situation, and a daylily has the same situation, where the true stem of the plant is very compressed. And it's from the stem that the roots are produced and also all of the top growth. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Perfect. And so an agave, it puts up a great big flower spike, and that's not the true stem of the plant. The true stem is the tiny little compressed crown of the plant from which everything arises. The roots underground, the top growth, and rhizomes are actually stems. But we're not talking about every possible way of propagating perennials today, but just dividing. There's many, many ways of propagating perennials: stem cuttings, leaf cuttings, root cuttings, tissue culture, of course seed, spores if they're ferns. But division is a method where we are taking an intact plant and dividing it into smaller pieces. So what you end up with are complete plants, whereas if you're doing a stem cutting or a leaf cutting, you're taking a part of the plant and hopefully regenerating the missing parts. I think most people have rooted something from a cutting, even if it's just in a glass of water, and you see a stem that started off without any roots has developed roots, and now it's a complete plant once again. And many herbaceous perennials can be propagated in multiple different ways, but the ones that have really compressed stems, like hostas and agaves, the normal way is by division. Now, I bought a number of plants from the nursery here yesterday that I'm going to take home at the end of the day today, but I'll show you what I often do with plants before I plant them. Get my tools out of the way. Let's see, what was this? This was an allium. Yeah. Allium millennium is a really wonderful plant in full bloom in the garden now. I could plant this plant as is. It would be the least stressful thing for the plant to do to plant it intact. But I always feel like, why not divide it while it's already out of the ground? So
does it stand a better chance of surviving if you keep it as a clump or if you separate it?
If I was going to plant it at a clump, it's ready to be planted. I've loosened up the roots a little bit. I do not believe in destroying the root system. I suspect there's people out here that take plants home and remove so much of the roots, they probably go back to the garden center with the roots and say, here, the roots back, I want half my money back. Oh, yeah. But no, the roots are maybe even more important than the top growth, so I like to preserve as much roots as possible. The whole issue of butchering root systems is because if you plant a tree that's been container grown and the roots in the pot have circled around, they can end up strangling the trunk of a tree. That's a big issue if you go through an entire life with just one stem. These are herbaceous perennials that have many stems, make new stems every year. So a circling root is not going to make any difference at all. And the same is true for most shrubs. And some shrubs you can divide too. I bought a Buddleia, not the common one, but Buddleia lineana, and I divided it into 3 last weekend before I bought it, before I planted it. I actually bought it first, but then divided it once I got home. So this is divided nicely. They have a bit of a rhizome. I don't know if you can see that dark rhizome there. This would be a really safe point to stop, because in order to divide that further, and I will for the purpose of this class, you'll actually have to cut into that rhizome. But let's see if this part, and I'm using my sense of touch more than my eyes to see. I can feel whether or not they want to be divided, you know, how readily they come apart. These are giving me a little bit of resistance, and you know, maybe we stop at that point. And these would be, they have really nice root system. We can plant them, you know, whatever the good spacing is, probably at least a foot apart, because these types of summer growing alliums multiply fairly quickly. And so we could stop at this point if you were really greedy, and sometimes I can be. Of course, I took my knife out of my pocket, but I don't remember if I put it back in my pocket. Yeah. Yeah.
Doug, would you plant those in the ground now? Or
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's a good question. Well, and it comes back to the question of timing. I think the time to do most things is when you have the time to do them. And so I have often transplanted things in the hottest part of the summer. If it's something that goes in the shade garden, it's not a particularly stressful time because it's not having to put up with really hot sun. But if you're transplanting, like if you went to a daylily nursery, they're digging daylilies this time of year. You go to the daylily nursery and you say, I want that one, and they dig them for you right then, knock all their precious soil off, and send you home with them. And there's a couple ways to facilitate their survival in a sunny location. One, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute, daylilies get cut back so they don't have much foliage to protect. And an alternative thing that I often do is provide temporary shade. It could be you have an overgrown shrub, you just break some branches off and stick them in the soil all around to protect shade, or maybe you get a few sticks and you have a little piece of burlap. Never use plastic because the heat builds up underneath it, but you can provide temporary shade for them. And then it's, you know, just even if you planted it without dividing it first, and I'm not saying you have to do it, but this is something you could do and something I routinely do. You need to keep it watered. I recently became a garden owner back in May, and the soil is very similar to here. It's a sandy loam, and I'm discovering that newly planted things I need to water once a day. The soil's really deep. In time, I hope the roots go really deep and they're not dependent on me. But, you know, at least every other day until they're established. And you know something's established when it starts to grow strongly. And, I should have talked about what I was doing. I just used the knife blade to cut through that rhizome, and these aren't really good divisions, but this plant is as tough as all get out. But I think the better advice is stop at this stage. I don't mean that 3 is the magic number, but stop at the point where they're separate plants, but you're not actually cutting through the rhizome on something like this. Questions on that? All right, well, just a quick couple. I could go either way. You know, the rain lilies, most rain lilies multiply really freely. This pot is already broken, so I know this is going to be full of bulbs because the pot is bulging. Nice sign. But most of the rain lilies multiply really quickly, so even if you plant this as one mass today, in maybe 3 years you're going to want to divide them. And this division of bulbs that are getting crowded it applies to everything, whether it's a gladiola or daffodil or an amaryllis. Some things like crinums actually get better the longer they're undisturbed, but they can be divided. So there's a whole bunch of bulbs in this pot. And you could divide them down to, individual bulbs. And mostly I think a big part of being comfortable with dividing plants is just get over your fear that you're actually hurting the plants. They're getting set back just slightly, but they'll be thankful that they're now spread out further rather than getting planted already crowded.
Freedom.
I love that. So, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, you might think, oh, Doug's going to get in trouble. People are going to know that they can buy one pot and take it home and make it into many pots, but I've always felt most of us have a limited budget. We might say, all right, I can only spend $50 today. I really like this rain lily. I want to have a big mass of it, so I'm going to buy 5 pots of it. Well, if I know I can take it home and divide it, a lot of the pots are more recently potted up, so not going to give you that many bulbs, but a lot of them will. If I know I only need to buy 1 pot, well, I'm still going to spend my $50, but I'm going to buy something else. So that's one. Oh, I wanted to say, here's a good example. When dividing bulbs, if the bulbs don't come free from the stem, like the onion had a stem, if they don't come apart freely, then I leave them connected to the mother bulb. I try not to be too greedy. No. Whale? Which examples to use? Well, I'll do the daylilies because that's really, this is a similar example. The natural life cycle of daylilies is by the time they're done, the foliage looks nasty. Does anyone really love looking at this tired old foliage? They start to put up new growth. And if you just cut the whole thing down, and the person who told me to do this was a daylily nurseryman, the new growth that it puts up will look fresh and clean all summer long.
Is there any rule of thumb, like not more than 1/3, that's like 3 or 4 inches? Okay. In terms of how?
Well, this one is not showing new growth yet. I absolutely have no doubt it's going to put up new growth. If it already had new growth, I would cut down sort of to it. It's okay if a little bit of it gets cut. It's probably even okay if a lot of it gets cut. But if this one I could have cut lower, and this is not, I don't feel it coming apart readily. But a really useful tool for dividing things that need a little bit more encouragement is a weeding knife. Everyone know this tool? The original Japanese ones are called hori hori. They have a wooden handle. I prefer them over these ones with plastic handles because it fits better, but the wooden handles look like mulch when I lose them in the garden, and I've never found them again, so I buy the one with the brightly colored handles. Now they're more typically, these are from A.M. Leonard, a tool company out of Ohio. A.M. Leonard's company color is orange, so most of them are orange, but most of my co-workers here have orange ones. So if I lose it and it's found, I want to know it's mine.
That's a neat tool because it's
it's got the measurements on the other side.
Yeah, and this has a sawtooth edge, which can be, you wouldn't use it to cut a limb off the tree, but if you had a woody perennial, you had to cut down and you don't have your...
And that's called a what?
Well, I
What
just
did
call
you
it a
call it?
weeding knife.
Weeding.
Or, yeah,
Soil knife? Sometimes I put soil knife.
sure. All right. So, you know, in daylilies and irises, we refer to that, you know, that as a fan. You could divide it smaller if you're maximizing production. You know, that's a lousy division. But, and often when you buy the mail order, they're selling you what is a 2 or 3 fan division. So that's a really nice division. It's making new roots at this time of year. So these are ready to be replanted because they've been cut back. I wouldn't feel a need to provide any temporary shade for them in this garden.
And when you get ready to plant that,
Yeah,
as long as those roots were, can you dig your little hole and just kind of swirl them around in there?
Yeah.
And they'll
yeah,
go down?
yeah. No, these were growing in this pot. If you had a heavy soil, the roots would probably be more horizontal than going down. So you don't have to dig a hole this deep, but you want to plant as many of the roots as possible. But,
So you wouldn't trim them off?
oh no, no. If it was something like a bearded iris, you might remove the oldest parts of the rhizome, but this one is not really wanting to be divided. This is, I collect old daylilies, so a lot of mine are from the 40s and 50s, some are older, but this is a modern thing that's not too gross. But I'm continuing to divide it because I'd be happy just to go home with one piece of it today, and if anybody wanted a division, I even have a bag of bags they can go in.
Which one is it?
I don't have a name on it. I bought it without labeled from a farmer, a nurseryman at the state farmers market, and they have some old pass along plants and some modern things, and they tend not to label anything.
What does it look like?
It's a yellow, no, it's not a tall one, but it's early, which I like because they're not a lot. It's about 2 feet tall in bloom. It's not a large flower, but it's not stalk, but it's a real pretty clear yellow. All right. Now this is a plant with stems, so it could be propagated by stem cuttings. Oh, look at those rhizomes. It's a spreader. But, you know, this is Eupatorium gregi. It looks like the perennial blue ageratum. Very, very similar. But, you know, even though it looks like it's planning on taking over the world, I've grown it for decades, and it does make a bigger clump, but it's not an aggressive spreader. And unlike the perennial blue ageratum, which is native to the East Coast, this is a Texas resident, but the big difference is it doesn't rot out in the summer, and it blooms all summer. So each stem generally can be pulled into a separate plant, and I'm just quickly doing this just to encourage you to get over your fear of brutalizing your plants to make more of them. This is really dry. I think I'll stand it in a
Our community garden leader will say, leave your heart at home.
leave your heart at home. I worked for a woman for years, and she liked to say, a timid gardener does not a great garden make. I don't know if that was Puddin's original, whether, so I don't know how many divisions that is, a dozen or so. And each one could be planted as a separate plant. And since this is a sun plant, I might cut it back a little bit just to make its transition. I bought this for a client, and it's a fuchsia, and fuchsias are shrubs, and it's not something I could divide, but wood. And this is a ginger lily. Ginger lilies are glorious summer blooming plants. A few of them are, you know, less than 5 feet tall, but most of them are great big ones. And this is Ann Bishop, that is just spectacular in bloom, but she's about 9 feet tall in bloom, so, you know, not something you plant in the window box. I hate wasting a pot, but I don't know that we could get this out otherwise. Now, everything, well, until we divided the eupatorium, there were all things with a compressed stem, like the onion, and, well, hostas and agaves and the bulbs and the daylilies. But a lot of herbaceous perennials grow from rhizomes. This is a rhizome, and the ginger root, which is related to, of course, the ginger lilies, is a rhizome. And a rhizome is an underground stem. And what do stems have? Oh, here. Let's see. These are the rhizomes, the underground stems of a Solomon seal. The lead point of the stem has a big terminal bud. And what happens when you pinch back a chrysanthemum or a coleus or any plant that has above ground stems?
They bush out.
Yeah, they bush out because on a stem, and a rhizome is an underground stem, there's all these buds that are just like ladies in waiting that aren't going to grow unless this terminal bud is removed. So, and that's what I'll demonstrate on this ginger lily. Oh, I haven't... If you buy a ginger lily and the rhizomes are above ground, make sure you plant it underground so it has a couple inches of soil on top of it. Now, one of the volunteers here today was asking if the rhizomes are edible. A coworker likes to answer that question. Everything's edible. At least once. But I suspect they're edible, but I suspect they're not very flavorful. All right, so this is the lead point of the rhizome. But if you were to, and if I was not leading this class, I'd probably maybe stop at this point and divide it into two. Maybe I'd divide it into three. But you can divide them smaller if your goal is to produce as many plants as possible, because, you know, I can't emphasize enough is that a rhizome is an underground stem. So when you take the lead part off, these back pieces of rhizome will grow. I did this once years ago when I worked at the Arboretum during COVID, and we did an online class on that. And I had never divided a ginger lily that vigorously. The lead part will continue with just one stem. These side points, you know, will be a little bit behind, but eventually they'll put up multiple stems, because the dormant buds on the rhizome, now that they're liberated from the lead part of the rhizome, will all grow. Yes?
When you take rhizomes off like that, are you kind of planning on waiting a long time before you see something above ground?
No, it might be a month at the most. Yeah, they're you know, in the heat of summer, they're going to grow. It's thank you for that question, because I realize it's a more complicated answer. These are the ginger lilies and the cannas, which also are growing from a rhizome, are putting up new growth all summer long. And so they're going to put up new growth before too long. Now, Solomon seal, the polygonatum, there's probably one within our vision from here. I think everybody knows Solomon seal. They only put up new growth once a year. So these will all regrow, but they won't regrow until next spring. It's sort of like if you had tulip bulbs and you plant them in the fall, you don't expect flowers next week. It's not going to happen till the spring. So, you know, don't be reluctant to divide them this time of year. And once the foliage, the stems, you know, now the foliage is mature, and since it's a shade plant, you can divide them into individual stems, and then, you know, snap the rhizome into smaller pieces. You know, I dug, these are extras from what I dug for the nursery. And the nursery only pots up the lead pieces, and now that I know that, I don't even send the back parts of the rhizome to them. I replant them from where I'm digging the lead part of the rhizome. And so, you know, this one could be divided into at least 3 pieces, and that's long enough. You could even divide it into 2 smaller pieces. I'm worried that somebody's going to report me to the plant version of PETA before abusing these poor plants. What's that?
They only want the lead part just for speed of propagation?
I think they're wrong. We have incredible people working in the propagation department, and I rarely disagree with anything they do. And they do absolutely amazing things and have come up with really innovative new ways. Just yesterday they were taking young baptisia plants out of plug trays, putting them all in pots about this depth, not one per pot, but just planting them as densely as possible. And in that deep container, it's take up less room in the nursery because they're not going to be potted up till next spring. But they develop big buds, and sometimes herbaceous, even woody plants that are growing from stem cuttings. A big problem is overwintering them because they have to form a new bud underground because herbaceous perennials die to the ground, and if there's nobody underground to regrow, then, you know, you've wasted all your time. You know, well, and tools, well, you saw my little hand tools for bigger perennials. I sometimes use 2 forks and then, you know, sort of separate them. And if you don't already own a garden fork, this is the standard issue one with flat tines. Don't waste your money on it. It's gonna cost you a lot more money to get one with these 2-dimensional square tines, because they generally won't bend, whereas these get bent the moment you encounter a tree root or a rock or something. Are there any questions? This is maybe all that I have to say right now. Yeah.
You didn't finish your thought about disagreeing with the planting of the lead rhizome for the nursery.
Yeah, you know, it's exactly the same situation with the ginger lilies. You know, they're growing from a rhizome just like the Solomon seal. They'll only plant this lead part. The rest, you know, either get put out for adoption or they get replanted. But I think if we utilize these back parts of the rhizome like this, you know, this will, for the most part, just continue that one shoot. In time, it'll obviously make additional shoots because that's a plant they grew. But these, if they potted up, would have like maybe 3 shoots all produced at the same time. But yeah, have I answered the question now?
I think you finished your thought, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Please.
Yeah.
For the rain lilies, when you're finished splitting them up, would it be advantageous to cut any of the flowers off of it to help them take, or is that optional?
That's a good question. When you're dividing something, it is advisable to cut flowers and seed pods or fruit off because they don't need to be supporting that at that time. Yeah, that's a good question. On a rain lily, the flower is pretty minimal, but like if these cannas were blooming and there was a whole bunch of flowers and now it's a whole bunch of fruit, and I used fruit in the botanical sense as that part of the plant that produces the seed, not that it's necessarily edible. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, suppose you had a herbaceous rhizome plant that you didn't want to spread.
Didn't want to spread?
Didn't want to spread.
Yeah.
And it was in mass. What would you do?
I might plant it in a pot and sink the pot in the ground.
Okay.
I've done that with things like horsetails. Horsetails in a pond will take over the whole pond in about 3 days. But if you put it in a pot and sink the pot in the ground, the horsetails will remain. But that's just one example. But yeah.
Will the tree roots, you think, go up into
Oh, yeah.
strangle it?
Yeah. And thank you for the question about tree roots. Yeah, if you have potted plants outside in the summer, it's good to either put them on like a stepping stone or something, or periodically check to see, because the tree roots will get up in there and they'll clog the drainage holes, and then the pot's not draining. Yeah, until I bought a house a few months ago, I had about 200 daylilies in pots, and some of them had sat where I lived previously, and there were tree roots in most of them. Yeah.
How would you go about dividing that agave, or would you?
The agaves, different species of agave, some never make any offsets. Some quickly spread underground by rhizomes. The ones that don't offset readily, again, it's just like cutting back a stem. The compressed stem, if we butcher some of the plants, and that's part of the mad science that goes on in the propagation houses, they'll scoop out the terminal bud, and even though the agaves that by nature don't make offsets, when you do that, the dormant buds will come into growth. And this is agave from the garden that had escaped the bed and was out at the edge of one of our driveways, and I think one of the food trucks ran over it. So, but now it's, I think yesterday there were like 4 offsets on it, but maybe Vince has been, demonstrating. So, butchering the plant is how we get some of the non-offsetting agaves to make offsets.
And there's one on that one.
Yeah, well, this is not the terminal bud. The terminal bud's been destroyed when it got run over, and that's another side one. And I see where they broke off one, and there was another. See the sort of the white spot? That's where there were shoots yesterday. Yeah. Other questions? So, I always think that most plants want to grow. So, get over your, I'm not saying any of you, maybe perhaps you are all fearless gardeners, but if you get over your fear of hurting something, you can quickly make more out of what you have. All right?
Shop for flowers, shop for fat pots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I selected this ginger for the fact that it had multiple stems and I see the rhizomes, but I'll probably be a good boy and go home and plant it this evening. Anybody want the daylilies start? There's bags of grocery bags over here where we have prickly pear pads for adoption. So I'll just save one for me, but The rest are up for adoption. It's a pretty enough daylily. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank